Change things for you. And then I just go up here and do that, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. Okay. So we've arrived at Gnosis of Mind, really focused in the development of faith, which is what we've really been talking about through the other Gnosis of Mind classes. And so in terms of practice, in the practice we'll do together in the latter half of this meeting, we'll we'll work with prayer. We'll work really with imagination, inspiration, and intuition, with with prayer, with sound or vibration of the mantra Om, focusing in the heart to concentrate ourselves. So we'll really be working with all that we've talked about in these classes so far. And the always in these days especially, we want to live in a way that we understand that the exterior is a reflection of the interior, and that's true on an of course an individual level and a collective level. And so as we continue to live in the circumstances that we're living in a immediate and also global level, this is such a profound and important true philosophy to really continue to reflect on, that the exterior that we're living, the circumstances that we're living, are a reflection of the interior, but to take that in a way that imagination and inspiration leads us towards a helpful comprehension rather than a depression, right? A comprehension that is born not of the mind filled with its doubts and fears and skepticisms, but a comprehension that's born of inspiration. That's what true comprehension comes from. It's born from superior emotion. And so to not get confused, or to cease being confused about what comprehension and understanding are based in, and to differentiate between, as Master Samael talks about, the depressing, uh, going between options of the rational mind, and he calls that depressing. To depressingly go back and forth between yes or no, or this or that, or comparisons and rationalities, and and rather to elevate our state with superior emotion, which brings us to a place of faith, which is connection with the being and the comprehension of the consciousness, that faculty in us that's capable of comprehending. So that, for instance, when I'm contemplating something such as the exterior is a reflection of the interior in times like this, comprehension would not lead me to depression and fear and anxiety. Comprehension would lead me to inspired action of the consciousness. Comprehension would inspire me then to really long and yearn and feel a genuine, inexhaustible impulse to pray and to meditate and to learn how to forgive and how to love and stay in love. Would impel us in a natural way, not because we're scared or feel guilty or ashamed, but impel us from a place of superior emotion or inspired comprehension that creates a genuine joy in the work, but a genuine feeling of responsibility, the kind of responsibility that we feel when we love a child, and we guide and we take care of them, when we hold their hand when walking across the street, because we love them. It's not because, oh, the burden of, I've got to watch this kid while we cross the street. There's actually just a naturalness to it, for anybody. And you see that even people who don't know each other. You see a child lost in the store, and naturally someone comes to help them, not because they owe it to them, not because it's their technical responsibility, but it's only natural that comes out of us, and it doesn't feel like a burden. And so that's what comprehension feels like. But trying to understand with the mind, the rational mind that lacks the inspiration of superior emotion, that lacks real imagination, feels like a burden. Feels like that depressing, what's the phrase I'm looking for?
Depressing option, I think he says, but
Yeah,
there's
kind of that depressing ping pong between the opposites of the rationalizing mind feels like a weight. It feels like a weight, a burden, the burden of the heavy mind. So we're here seeking to relearn what it is to know, and that's what Gnosis means. Gnosis comes to redefine what it is to know.
The Man of La Mancha that puts down the depressing burden of sanity.
Yes, right. For those of you who watched Man of La Mancha with us, it was talked about in that movie to put down the burden of sanity. Because how we define sanity in this world is insane. It's backwards, it's inside out. And that's why through time, really, the Gnostics under different names through different times have been really misunderstood, misinterpreted. They've never been really understood because on the common line of life that isn't integrated with the line of the being, this is crazy, right? It's insanity. Welcome, Michael. Hi again. And so to take on the axioms that Gnostic philosophy teaches us, and to have them transform us into a useful and sustainable action, a way of thinking and feeling and living that produces harmony instead of disharmony, that produces connection and love instead of confusion and worry, and wears us down, right? Because we could take an axiom like this in our minds, that the exterior is a reflection of the interior, and become depressed and burdened and heavy. We can take Gnosis in that way if we stay in the lesser mind. Then Gnosis will just weigh us down. But that's not Gnosis. That's not what Gnosis is. It's not that burden, that weight. And so differentiate between Gnosis and your mind that might be interpreting the teachings and what the teachings really are. And so this way of approaching Gnosis always from the consciousness and always seeking superior emotion is how to really have Gnosis. And we can pretty easily differentiate, like, what is my state? What is my attitude? What is my feeling going towards a practice, right? Is it feeling like more on my to-do list, a burden, a heaviness, or do I feel inspired and attracted? And last night in a group, we were each sharing kind of how our practice is going, and just hearing from different folks, like what's working for them, what's inspiring, right? What produces consistency. And just like in any relationship with anything or anyone, obviously if we're attracted, we're magnetized to it, then we long for it. We call them, we show up, we're inspired towards the relationship. And so our practice is like this too. So it's important that though we're in groups and we're kind of in a program and we're given practices that go along with the teachings, and that's important to balance knowledge and being, with the information we take in, with a practice that facilitates grasping the information. So that's valuable. And what we each find through time is that each of us, we kind of find what types of practices and when I practice and what really inspires me, what magnetizes, what generates more of that magnetism and that inspiration. Because that's the kind of practice that's going to bring us true comprehension and gnosis and develop faith, that direct experience of what's being taught. Mm-hmm. And so, Master, one thing that Master Samael says regarding all of this is that unfortunately people linger lengthily between the past and the future, between past values and the Gnostic work. And this makes the work vague and incoherent, giving it no completeness. And the conclusion is that we end up losing time, which is really energy. What time is energy. And we feel de-energized then for the work. And in that low energy, skepticism, self-doubt builds. So lingering between past values, consumption in the line of life, and in that old way of thinking, and in that depressing mind versus the work, doing the work. So that's really the essence of why we teach at all. But certainly any public talk or any, which this is, even though most of us are not really at a public level, that's our intention, is to reach a state of inspiration and to be inspired towards inspiration. We have to be inspired to be inspired towards being inspired. Mm-hmm. And we'll notice when we are and when we're not. So we've seen this kind of image or glyph before, showing the different aspects of ourselves, right? That first chamber talk around how we're constructed, the 3 brains and the 5 centers, but really the 7 centers, including the superior intellect, the inner mind, the intuitive mind, the non-thinking mind, and the superior emotion, that place of feeling inspiration. Mm-hmm. The center of superior emotion related with the heart. And so we're wanting to elevate ourselves into those superior centers, to make contact with those superior centers. And what that then implies is that we need to grow our awareness, our observation, our clairvoyant observation, like really seeing, really knowing, seeing in the moment what's happening, not just projecting, but our clear vision, self-observation of like, what's going on in my instinct, what's going on in my sexual center, what's going on in my lower emotional center related to the Manipura chakra and the solar plexus, what's going on in my movement in my body. Am I harmonious in my movements? Am I aware and connected with my movements? Are my centers working together? And what's going on in my intellect? So to observe and witness with the aim of putting the consciousness and this feeling of inspiration within the consciousness in charge of those centers. So having the superior emotion really be in charge of those lower centers, to have the instinct consult the heart, to have our sexuality consult the heart, to have our lower emotions consult the heart. The heart becomes this consultant for all those lower centers. Like a guide, a lead. Mm-hmm. The reference, the reference point is superior emotion. And as we like to share, that philosopher Voltaire saying, the most important decision we can make is to be in a good mood. or a positive state. And we can just notice, and it doesn't mean like perma happiness. It doesn't mean like this forced smile. Um, Sometimes there's genuine sadness with comprehension, for instance, genuine pain with comprehension, for sure. I mean, if we never feel that pain, we're not going deep in our comprehension. But always, always with comprehension, even if it's about my transgressions, even if it's that I've hurt someone or myself, even if it comes with a deep regret that produces that natural desire to change, there's always a strong thread of joy at the discovery of truth. There's always that thread of joy that always accompanies truth. Like feeling truth is always joyful at some level. So it's that kind of conscious pain, conscious suffering, as we talk about in the work. So we observe these lower centers and consult the heart. And that leads us to be able to live more from the interior mind, the intuitive mind, the inner mind. So again, that imagination, being able to see what's going on in my instinctive center, for instance, be able to see what I'm feeling in the sensations of my lower emotions, being able to see my body as it's in movement, my posture, and what it's communicating to myself and others. So that's clairvoyance, that's imagination. So to be able to see imaginatively, but with clarity, and the inspiration, the superior emotion, to be active. And so, what do I need to do to activate that superior emotion throughout my day, and at the beginning of and throughout my practices, and as I go into the night, because that's what will lead to having lucid night experiences that further increase that superior emotion. And all of that leads to intuition, that connection to the interior mind, the mind that really knows. And all of that is so transcendental to that uh, mind that's caught up in the depressing option between the opposites.
There's another word I know. Every time you said it, I thought
It's
it's
not quite there yet, but we'll get it. If anybody else knows,
depressing function or facilitation. That's not it either.
none of that's it. No. And we've talked about having three fundamental aspects of mind. We're already talking about that inner mind, but also the sensorial mind and the intermediate mind. And that's that sensorial mind really fixed to the sensations and really consumed by the way of perceiving that's confined to our senses. So the sight being the main one, right? And so our mind and our vision, our sight, kind of meld into one. And that's why it's so valuable to close our eyes during meditation and at least reduce that sense-based mind by taking away the that sense of sight in the moment so that we can go more internally. We can go more internally. So that sensorial mind that's really consumed in the touch and the taste and the sight and what I can hear. And when we give too much of our faith, when we invest too much of our perception and what we are willing to believe into that sensorial mind, then we're farther away from the inner mind. We've studied this. And then the intermediate mind, that mind of belief. And that mind of belief, if we kind of settle for that, and people do, and they get fixed into religious dogmas that they're not willing to ungrasp any more than the very sensorial, rational person is willing to ungrasp just the information of the senses. Likewise, the very belief-oriented fanatic is unwilling to ungrasp, in a way, it's synonymous with that sensorial mind, unwilling to ungrasp their own beliefs. And so we seek to go beyond that. And again, superior emotion is the bridge. Superior emotion is the bridge. And getting in touch with those qualities of the being that come through as superior emotion. So we understand that we are, while being these seven centers, we are the tree of life itself. And we are multidimensional, as is, all of existence multidimensional. So there's this microcosmos and macrocosmos mirroring of each other, of our multidimensionality. And that just like the whole of creation is this conveying of the absolute, this conveying of divinity through to matter, we're constructed in that way as well. That we are matter, and yet we are spirit both. And yet we can become so consumed, a person becomes so consumed just in the matter and just in those lower centers, without a connection to superior emotion and inspiration and real comprehension, and without connection to the inner intuitive mind. And so it's through those superior centers and our willingness to open up to them, to go beyond our dogmas and projections and beliefs and suppositions and memories, and beyond that mind, and also beyond our inferior emotions, beyond our attachments to inferior states of doubting and shame and guilt and fear and anxiety and depression. And we've got to be willing. There's got to be a willingness, and the will is the center of the tree. The realm of will is the center of the tree. It's that turning point, really. The willpower in us is the turning point. Am I willing? Am I willing to let go of this irritation? I have to start with that willingness. Am I willing to let go of this anxiety and this fear, this self-doubt? Am I willing? Am I willing to stop thinking so that I can contact the space between the depressing option of those thoughts?
It might be the depressing process of options.
That's probably what it is. The depressing process. Yes. Process. Yes. So willingness is that turning point, and that willingness is a superior emotion. That willingness is superior emotion, and it rests in the heart of the tree, and it rests in the heart of us. Our will is here. Mm-hmm. And our will is either kind of sunk into the lower centers of the impulses and desires of the instincts, the sex, and the lower emotions and the body, or the will is more transcendent than that. And it varies from hour to hour, from day to day, from practice to practice. Mm-hmm. But for us to check our will, what is my willingness? And so, as Voltaire said, the most important decision we can make is to be in a positive state, is to be in a conscious state, is to be willing to let go of negative states, is kind of the first real decision we make in any day. Because up until then, we're just behaving mechanically until we've made the decision to be willing to be conscious. We have not made any decision. We've just been on automatic. So to check our willingness, our will, and where it begins with a willingness, I'm willing to feel better. I'm willing to stop thinking. And then we practice, and then we apply what we've learned on how to do that. In so many ways. But we are the tree of life, and how we, go from these denser dimensions within ourselves and within our perception. The way we ascend is that willingness and superior emotion. We've got to at least get to the center of the heart with willingness and superior emotion. I yearn to be more transcendental. And we climb the ladder of our own perception, our own consciousness, our own tree of life, right? Within a day, within a practice, within a conversation. Check ourselves, like, where am I? Am I kind of above the line or below the line in terms of the center of my own tree of life? Am I willing and then working to get up? And as Jesus and other masters have described, they describe going to the hilltop or the mountaintop. That's what they're talking about. They're talking about getting to a more transcendental state from which they can perceive in a real, true way, and then converse with higher beings, but at least be able to see things as they really are. Because I can't really see from underwater. I can't really see if I'm fixed to my instincts in a given moment. I've got to transcend above that. So that's what prayer helps to facilitate us to do. Prayer is completely about this, is all about superior emotion. And so, how weird is it that we can get trapped in dogmas of religions and prayers, like my prayer is right, and this whole thing in Christianity, like the Protestants and the Lord's Prayer, like, a prayer that Yeshua gifted humanity to help us do the very work we're talking about. And on the one hand, you've got the Protestants who say, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors, and the Catholics who say, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And it's kind of used as this way of like, well, are you Protestant or are you Catholic? I mean, it's just so bizarre what we do and we fix these transcendental teachings that are meant to elevate us and have us experiencing truth and being able to carry out that prayer. I mean, the whole line is about forgiveness, acceptance, connection. And yet, in this different wording, it's used for division. You become either Protestant or Catholic based on how you speak that line, and you're either in or out. How weird. How very weird, because that's the opposite of what prayer is meant to do. And so we draw from different prayers. The prayer we're going to say in the practice is the prayer of St. Francis. and we're also going to work with the mantra Om. And as we've talked about, the Buddhist prayer of great compassion, Om Mani Padme Hum, is like the Lord's Prayer of that tradition. So we're going to work with this mystical Christian prayer, and we're going to work with this Sanskrit and often used in Buddhism vibration of Om to help us to open our hearts and put ourselves in our hearts and say a sincere prayer. And so we understand that while there's the superior aspects of the tree that we're seeking to connect with, go to the hilltop of the fifth, sixth, and beyond dimension to be able to see and witness and inform and organize the lower dimensions, just like creation does, just like divinity does. And we become an aspect and a very alive aspect of divinity when we clear our minds and we meditate and we elevate our state. We're elevating within our own tree of life. But then we understand that there's also the shadow of the tree, the klipoth, the subconscious and infraconscious of ourselves as well, that's that lower reflection of the tree. And so in any given moment, depending on our state, we can notice the emotions that we're feeling, and know where we are in this. And so we've shown this image before. It's been a while. We had a public class about a year ago, which is when we last together prayed the prayer of St. Francis. So we figure about every year we could do this together, praise the prayer of St. Francis. And we understand we've got these two lines of life going at all times, the line of life itself and the line of the being. And every moment is an intersection of those two. And we put this graphic of the crossing of those lines in Malkuth, the earth of the tree of life, which is us as the philosophical earth, which is where we decide where we're going to put our attention and what we're willing for. And so we can notice, am I open to and yearning for and seeking and looking for gratitude, patience, forgiveness, compassion, and so on? That's indicates to us that willingness. Or am I only willing to stay? Am I unwilling to let go of this anger, this greed, etc.? Am I choosing to be dragged into my own underworld? And so when we understand these things on a more energetic level, in terms of understanding ourselves as a multidimensional being, then we begin to recognize and understand, wow, it's like choosing to go into a dark alley. It's like choosing to kind of go, how behind big buildings, that's where the smelly trash is and everything, and the dirty puddles. You're like, what is that weird film on top of the water, and stepping in it on purpose? We begin to notice it like that going into these lower emotions and staying there is like to stay in the dumpster area. And we begin to recognize that that's kind of an odd choice. Like, that's not something I want to do. And we cease to normalize hanging out behind the building anymore. Because that's what we're doing. We're hanging out down there with an unwillingness to let go of those. And we begin to seek, okay, what's a practice that I can do? What's a way of thinking that I can do? How can I relax myself on purpose? How can I maybe step outside? It's so beautiful. And the sun maybe is that force of inspiration that I need right now. What do I need to do, Voltaire? What do I need to do, Voltaire, to make that choice, make that most important choice, to rise up? Because that's what Voltaire was talking about. It was such a simple statement, but he's talking about rescuing ourselves from hell in that choice. He had a way of saying things in such a light way, but he was a deep esotericist who understood what he was saying. So again, imagination, inspiration, and intuition, this line of work and this way of framing the work so well, that I know for me in the beginning I didn't really understand this so well. Like, my concepts about imagination just weren't very clear and lucid.
Imaginative.
They weren't very imaginative. They weren't really clear and lucid, and inspiration. But superior emotion, again, inspiration enables us to comprehend and to repent, to change, because it elevates us to a state of consciousness capable of comprehension. Mm-hmm. As one of our teachers, Rafael Vargas, says, that the consciousness is of a high vibratory frequency, but the low vibratory frequency of the mind impedes it from entering into action. So we submit the consciousness to a mind that's in the lower regions, that's in the Klipoth. And we can't then really see with, feel with, understand with that consciousness. So the perceiver is darkened, and we don't have connection with it. And so to pray is to put ourselves, to rescue, is to rescue the consciousness and to put ourselves in the ray of creation that's flowing through the tree of life all the time. And that ray of creation is what creates itself, what creates everything, but it also renews and restores and nourishes us. So through this ray of creation, which is the absolute abstract space flowing through all of the dimensions of creation and all of the dimensions of ourselves, that ray, that is why ancient people worship the sun, because that sun is a symbol and actually is an aspect of the absolute itself, is an aspect of uncreation that comes to create a solar system. And and people have understood this through time. And so that ray of creation is constantly flowing through everything, and allowing creation, nature to exist, allowing, it gives us all of life, but it gives us interior life too. And that's what we're now, it's like, okay, we've got life, we're lucky we've got physical life. And then this physical life, the purpose of this physical life is to connect with that internal interior life and life force that is the ray of creation. So to pray is to put ourselves in contact with that very ray of creation and to vibrate at this higher frequency of consciousness. To pray is to make the personality passive, unless we're in that dogmatic way of praying that really is about the personality, a religious personality, for instance. But that's not what praying really is about. And we understand this if we're here. So it's to make our personality and our mind passive. And this is why people have had these mudras, natural mudras through time. For instance, we could call this a mudra of prayer that's very natural, a posture of prayer, right? And different mudras of prayer that tune us, that kind of tone us to that higher vibratory frequency. Being on the knees stimulates the chakras of the knees that stimulate humility, for instance. So when we sometimes we'll do prayers as runes, for instance. I really like the Tibetan rites of rejuvenation because it's an all-encompassing way of praying, where even the body is praying. So in a rune, like the rune Fa, where we face the sun with the palms are praying to the solar absolute. The arms are praying, the whole body is praying, the hands are praying, right? And so we can pray in a whole body way and put ourselves more in that higher vibratory frequency, or whatever works for us. Sometimes the prayer is just lying down completely relaxed, making the mind and the personality almost non-existent, so that the consciousness can totally rise to the fore and we get above the line. And there's that total willingness. When we relax, there is a willingness, that positive willingness, that Voltaire willingness, just in relaxing the face and the shoulders to begin a practice, just in letting the breath go all the way more deeply down through the lungs, a willingness to let in the breath of life, to inspirit. There's a willingness in that. So all that is praying, really, so long as we have that attitude of willingness and praying and that longing and yearning. We pray in many ways. Envy is a negative prayer, for instance, to take from, to have more than, to put down. Arrogance is a type of hellish praying, we could say, that lower kind of praying. But we're talking about letting all that go and having an attitude of prayerfulness, of longing, of willingness. That is a prayer. And then sometimes we put formal words to our prayers, like we will in the practice that we're going to do. So Master Samael says something wonderful in relation to all this, that without divine grace, without the extraordinary aid of the sacred breath, the intimate self-realization of the being would turn out to be something impossible. He says that self-salvation is what is needed. And this means our own being, our own innermost, reaching to us as we reach to our being. So in other words, we could say the superior emotion reaching down, and a willingness of me with my instincts and my sexual impulses and my solar plexus related, my gut feelings, and the needs and the wants of my body, a willingness to reach up. And meanwhile, inspiration reaches down. And as one of our teachers has said, that inspiration seeks me and always finds me working or willing. And so that's what's meant by this self-salvation. Self-salvation, he says, is what is needed, and this demands full identification of what saves us and what is saved. And in the context of this talk, we're talking about what saves us is inspiration, is that willingness to feel inspired and to let the bridge be there. And then it's only natural to walk that bridge towards the interior mind, towards comprehension. And from there, it's only natural to then change in a conscious direction. Anything that we truly realize in our hearts means change, means change. So we're going to now take a break, and we've decided we take 8. We're going to take a break and stretch and go, maybe if the sun is shining, you go put your palms towards the sun and take care of yourself. So we'll be back at 1 till. Okay. Case in point. Case in point. So I did go outside because it is sunny and beautiful, and the sun is at like just this great angle to do a rune, and I did the rune fa. And then as I'm done with the rune, and I'm in a positive state, but I look down, and you know how the dandelions, they become the little puff heads and they want to spread their seeds all over. And so then there's just this, oh yeah, I got to deal with these puff-headed dandelions, or the whole yard's going to be dandelions, and so it's that. So what do I choose to do? Do I carry that back in? Do I obsess on that? Do I like think too much about that? So sensorially, I notice this thing that needs to, or I feel needs to be done or dealt with. And what do we do with that? We're constantly spirit and matter and spirit, and there's a lot of matters to be dealt with. But how do we put it in perspective and not lose touch with superior emotion and inspiration, not put ourselves inside of the things that have to be dealt with? And I mean, at least for me, it's not that easy. It's not just like, oh, this idea solves it. It takes a constant willingness, a willingness to not be consumed by that, to not become addicted to matter thinking or materialistic thinking, to not become addicted to the to-dos, to let the consciousness solve life. And why the mind impedes that higher vibratory frequency is because we just give too much faith and license to that mind, that sensorial mind, and even the intermediate mind, to take more than it really needs to and take more than it is helpful and useful. That in the inner mind, in intuition, is clarity, is simplicity, is knowing, right? And that's so practical. Like, to live from intuition is incredibly practical, because intuition knows, and it is decisive, and it is active, instead of being caught in that depressing option of the opposites, and always in confusion and doing something and then wanting to undo it. And but to live from a superior emotion, to live intuitively, is the most practical way to live. And so it's so odd that I think that thinking about all the matter, all the matters to be dealt with, is how to handle life. But the consciousness is the best manager for life. Intuition is the best lead for our life, really. Yeah. So anyway, it was just funny because there I was in the break, kind of with this whole, just a simple moment of a choice towards willingness, right? Yeah. And so it's unfolding for us in every moment, in every moment. So for the practice, we will be praying this prayer of St. Francis a couple of times. And so I'll read it right now just before we even begin. And St. Francis, a Christian mystic who was known to be able to speak with the animals, and um, went from someone raised in a very materialistic family and way of being, to letting go of all of that, and living in a much more transcendental state, and let go of living for matter and materialism, let go of the fear in relation to that. And and so this prayer from him is lived, it's coming from a really lived place. And he says, Lord, being intimate, my true self, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. And we understand through Gnosis that dying is the willingness. Dying to the unwillingness is the dying that's being talked about. We'll also work with, like I mentioned, the mantra Om. And so prepare for your practice. Take a posture in which you can be really relaxed, in which you can let go of your mind, let go of your personality, let go of your tension, and really relax, even to the point of that lucid drowsiness, but also in a way that facilitates, staying in the practice. So not stiff, but not slumped, right? And if you're comfortable with it, close your eyes and find your breathing. And let your inhales be long down through the trunk of your body. Let your exhales be complete to their end, all the air out. And as you inhale and exhale in this longer, slower, deeper way, let your body relax. Breathe through any tension in your body. Let your mind relax and breathe through the thinking and the memories and let them go with your exhales. And do not drift away with the breathing, but become more fully present. Let your breathing help you to stay in the moment, in the practice, in your awareness. So letting go of tension and mind to allow the conscious presence to be more radiant. And let's have a few Hamsa pranayamas, elevating the energy through the body and the internal bodies, elevating up the spine, the tree of life of our spine, and ultimately into the heart with Sa. And now be with your breathing as if your breath goes directly into your heart and out from your heart. And just focus in your heart, that ultimate landing of your Hamsa. And now just stay in the heart. And let your whole body relax all around your heart. The body that surrounds the heart relaxes, and you let go of tension and holding, and let that conscious presence radiate within your heart. and seek and yearn for and feel as willing as you can to vibrate at that higher frequency of consciousness with a feeling of appreciation, gratitude, the feeling of willingness itself, that yearning, that longing for peace, that longing, that yearning to feel love, to feel genuine humility, to feel those qualities streaming through that ray of creation into your heart, and letting your heart do what it's naturally wants to do, to yearn, to long, to love, to emanate peace, to forgive, to feel grateful. Seek into your heart and also allow your heart to express, to feel, to emanate. And this state, in and of itself, is a state of praying. And connected with our hearts, we'll again pray the prayer of St. Francis. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. O Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned. And it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. And from this state of willingness and inspiration, let's sing the mantra Om. Just 3 times, Om, as we continue to vibrate the heart, concentrate in the heart. Seek into the heart and let the heart express and emanate what is natural to it, superior emotion. And we work in concentration to Let this heart connection be intense as everything else relaxes with the mantra Om. And now sitting in silence and continuing in this practice, becoming one with your heart in its natural state of willingness and inspiration and superior emotion as you concentrate in the heart. You may use the breath or the mantra Om silently as you notice all that distracts, all that comes to sink your state. And you continue seeking into the heart, that refuge of self-salvation, returning to that yearning in the heart to be in contact with inner peace, with inspiration, with willingness. And once more, purifying our minds and hearts with the prayer of St. Francis. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. O Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned. And it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. And with 3 profound breaths, let us take account of this practice, of this class, and what are we taking away in terms of willingness, comprehension, and our state. What are we going forward with out of this talk and out of this practice to gather that and write it in our heart? Mm-hmm. Good.